my father, Andreas, was dedicated to his family. His two brothers had gone to America. His father has gone to America to find the streets paved with gold, and they would send money back to the island. Meanwhile, my father had three sisters, and his mom he had to feed, and he worked for the Italian government in the lighthouse all by himself for like 17 years.
What was that like? Did you ever ask him what it was like to be
I
on the
went to that
lighthouse?
island. I have video of that island,
Right.
and maybe I send you a copy of the video.
I'd love to see it. Yeah.
Yeah, and uh, it's a rock and with a lighthouse on it. As a matter of fact, we are remodeling it, not painting it and making it uh, more accessible to any tourists that want to go to that island. But it's a piece of rock,
Did
and
you ever
he's there
ask
by
him?
himself
Yeah.
with a bunch of I don't know, goats, sheep. I don't know what he had, and he would wait for the patrol boat to bring him food every 30 days.
Oh, wow. So his only like touch with the outside world was when that boat would come with food.
Yes, and he learned to speak fluent Italian, and he ran the lighthouse. He ran the whole island, and the island that he was from is like 10 miles away, 12 miles away. But in a small boat, it's a tough 12 miles.
Did you ever ask him what it was like being on that island for in such
I only
isolation?
regret I didn't spend enough time with my father,
Okay.
and a lot of sons will tell you that they're so busy, and we don't spend enough time with our fathers. And when they're gone, then you regret it. I regret not spending enough time and asking him about all all the things that our family did. And as a matter of fact, as a second book, uh, we're doing a second book. We're going to do a little bit of history about the family, where they came from, and what our forefathers were doing.
Well, I mean, you had a lot of history in the book that you did write, going back to the island, which is really fascinating. And it sounded like a lot of your relatives were already in the U.S. before you even got here.
Right now, there's only 700 people, 800 people on the island,
Wow.
and there's maybe 6,000 of them in New York, and like a few thousand in Toronto, and a few thousand in the Tampa area. Everybody left.
It's wild.
It's
Yeah.
a volcanic island. There's only two volcanic islands in that area. One is Santorini, that has been active lately, and
Okay.
one is Nisyros, where I was born. And Originally, we're doing the research on it now. That some of my relatives originally came from the island of Crete,
Okay.
and but that's in the 1600s. So getting information from that period of time, because that whole area was under the Turkish Empire, and it wasn't easy.
No, it wasn't easy. Yeah, I think a lot harder in the good old days than it is today, for sure.
So, John, talking about speaking about your father had a tremendous work ethic from what I read, and you obviously same. So, was that something that was innate in you, your work ethic, or do you think you learned it from your father?
Well, my father, when he came over to the states in 1949, uh, his two brothers had to sign on a dotted line that if he didn't pay the rent or whatever his bills are,
Right.
then his two brothers would have to pay. And my father comes from a very proud family, and I guess that's where I got it from. My father worked 7 days a week because he didn't want to ever go to his brothers for money. And he worked on Longchamp's restaurant on 42nd Street and Lexington Avenue.
Yep.
And every time I drive by 42nd and Lex, I have tears in my eyes. I can see my father there. And then on weekends, he would work in Long Island City, Astoria, because all the Italian restaurants were there. And my father spoke fluent Italian, and he could be a waiter instead of just being a busboy at Longchamps.
So busboy during the week and then a waiter all weekend, 7 days a week.
Yes.
What was it like? growing up in West Harlem? I mean, what were your
Um,
earliest memories? What was it?
we never knew we were poor,
Okay.
because my father always provided, worked hard, provided. My mother would go to the A&P down the block, and we ate chicken a lot. And even though we lived on 135th Street, uh, we never knew we were poor because we were never hungry.
And rumor has it your mom used to peel your grapes. So you were the the only what was it like
That's
being the only
true.
son?
That's true. And then the other story I tell is when I was going to go to NYU. Originally, I got a congressional nomination to West Point, but I was an only son, an only child. My mother cried, my father yelled, so I ended up going to NYU Uptown campus. And then I wanted a car, so I had a um, insurance policy they took out for me when I was a infant, and it was $800 in the insurance policy, and we cashed it in, and I bought a Buick Special V6 engine for like $900 to be able to go to NYU, so I could feel I'm in with the in crowd. Then the garage down the block from 135th Street was $38 a month.
It's
So
a lot
my
of money
mother
those
says,
days.
I'm going to go to work. My mother goes to work in the needle trades, and she works for 2 weeks there, and she only makes $38. I
Unbelievable.
said, Mom, I'm not going to. I had tears in my eyes. I said, Mom, I'm not going to let you do that. You quit that job. I'll make do somehow. And because I didn't want to work. Could you imagine your mother working 2 full weeks for
In a
$38?
sweatshop, right? Basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
And
yeah.
it was so sad. And I went to work uh, in a local grocery store that I ended up, the guy that ran it ended up being like a big brother to me,
Is that
Tony,
cousin
cousin Tony. I
cousin
called
Tony?
him cousin Tony. He wasn't really
Yeah,
a
yeah.
cousin, but big brother Tony, cousin
Yeah.
Tony.
Well, I have a question about that though. So, I mean, you obviously become one of the most successful Americans of all time, and at that age, were you aware of money and success? I mean, what was the mindset? Obviously you felt like you didn't want for anything.
Well, you mean
What was,
the big
where did the
objection I had with Tony is he was paying the cashier $1 an hour, and he was only paying me 90 cents an hour. And, and
was that good money
And I
back
used
then?
to, and he didn't have he didn't have a conveyor belt. He only he stored the beer and the soda down in the basement, and I would have to 4 cases at a time bring it up the stairs, and that's like
It's a hell of a
I
workout.
must have been a strong kid because 4 cases of soda, it's got to weigh 70, 80 pounds
That's a lot of weight.
up the stairs and not
Yeah.
fall on your on your back,
You had big biceps back then, John.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But look, I learned the work ethic when I finished high school and was going to go to NYU. I was all set to sleep on the couch for the whole summer. And my mother threw me off the couch and got me a job at Tony's store. So I go from one extreme to the other, from sleeping in the couch the whole summer or working 70 hours a week for Tony.
And you had actually mentioned that, like, if you do something, you do it 100%. So if you were going to sit on the couch all summer, you were going to do that 100%.
100%.
So, like, when you went into this, obviously you weren't in the ideal situation. Now I have to do work at this grocery store all summer. What was your impression of it? Was it like, I really enjoy business, this is exciting, or this is going to give me freedom to actually?
I didn't think about that. I thought about mostly um, success.
What did it mean?
I wanted, I had the responsibility of making sure uh, all the dairy was right, all the groceries were right. And I would make sure that everything was there because it'll make the store make more sales. And I wouldn't go home until everything was perfect. So I was a little bit of a perfectionist.
Perfectionist, yeah.
But if the product is there and people see it, they'll buy it. And so that's the way I learned the grocery business a little bit. So I go to school Monday through Friday because in those days, NYU It was a 5-day a week school. It's not like these days where they could program your credits in 3.5 days and you're out.
You're watching The Price is Right at 12 o'clock noon, like I was. Right.
And at a certain point, my cousin Tony, or my big brother Tony, uh, had an argument. They opened up another store on 100th Street and Broadway with his uncle running it. And his
Uncle
uncle
Nick.
was a nice guy, Uncle Nick. He was a nice guy, but he didn't know much about running a store. He was just a caretaker.
Yeah.
And every day, they would argue about something. And the old story was, if you bought 10 cases of oranges, it was a good price. You should have bought 20. Next time you bought 20 cases of oranges, why'd you buy 20? They're going to go rotten. So
Right.
Tony did not want to have a family fight.
Okay.
It was his mother's brother. He didn't want to have a family fight. And he says, John, you got to buy the store. I said, Tony, I'm going to school 5 days a week. I'm going to buy the store.
How old are you?
I'm probably a sophomore, junior in NYU.
You're like 20 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I never said no to Tony.
Okay.
So I did it. And he gave me notes. He signed 10 notes at $1,000 a piece.
Were you scared, nervous? Because that sounds like an
I
interesting.
signed what do I know? I'm an engineering student. So I signed the 10 notes. I didn't even know if I could make $1,000 a month to pay the note. I signed it. We jumped in there. So I'd go to school from 9 o'clock in the morning was my first class
Okay.
to 4 in the afternoon. 4 in the afternoon, I'd go to the store and work till 1 o'clock in the morning, because when the
Wow.
other supermarkets closed at 10 o'clock, we did most of our business between 10 and 1 because we were the only ones open.
So that was like the secret
Yeah.
to getting more business. Yeah.
All business. And I worked at 1 o'clock in the morning and then go home, sleep. And then 3 days a week, I would have to go to Hunts Point Market to buy the produce because we sold a lot of produce.
So you actually had to go and buy the produce.
Hunts Point Market. And
Did you sleep 5 hours a night, 4 hours a night?
depends what night it is. But I was dedicated, and we ended up making a success. I ended up making $500 a week, $1,000 a week, and that was a lot of money in those days.
Which is wild, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you're making good money. You're obviously working around the clock. Was it like an exhilarating feeling? Was it a
And the
tired
only time I
feeling?
went out is Saturday night after closing the store. I had a couple of my friends. We just went out together, and my first wife. We went out together, and
And that was it.
that was it. That was
Yeah.
the only fun time was Saturday after 1 o'clock in the morning.
Which I'm sure you had some really good nights
Any
out.
regrets about missing Woodstock then?
Oh no regrets. We did what we did, and you know, uh, it's amazing how much energy you have at that age.
What was like at that point? So obviously you have this successful grocery store, which at 20 years old is pretty remarkable. Were you starting to see the future of that
So
time?
Aaron Goldberg.
Okay.
Aaron Goldberg was my Eggman. He was about 4'2", and he come visit me and says, John, there's another store available on 87th Street. Do you want it? The people were upset that they raised the rent. And they raised the rent from $800 a month to $1,100. And they closed the store and left. So in my head, why would these people close the store over $300?
Right. Right. Were their margins that
I
bad?
went down, looked at the store. I got the store. And that was the first Red Apple I opened. And was a success. And Nick stayed behind at the 7-Eleven. And I took my father, who graduated, my God, who retired
Yeah.
from Longchamps after 25 years, 30 years, and I put him back to work in my store.
Was he happy about that?
At 7-Eleven. So him and Nick worked together. My father wanted to work.
Yeah.
He enjoyed it. So I guess I worked the ethics of working uh, long. The book I wrote, and I said, you could be successful in business, but there are sacrifices too. You're going to sacrifice. You're not going to have, when I was going to college and I was working every weekend, working every day,
Yeah.
my friends would go ski weekends in the Catskill Mountains, and me, I was working.
Did you feel like you were missing something? Did it feel like, man, I wish I would have had those opportunities too, or it just didn't even cross your mind?
See, once I had responsibility,
Yeah.
I just stayed to the responsibility, and I didn't try to make excuses why I should go, to the mountains or I
You
should
just
go
didn't
skiing.
entertain it, basically. You
Yeah,
just said, this is my lot. I've got to stay here and I've got to be
yes,
successful.
and and the store has to open on time, the store has to close on time, and it's got to be successful. And I remember when lived on 135th Street in Harlem, I had a 5-inch TV set,
Okay.
and that's how I learned to speak English because my parents only spoke Greek at home.
Wow.
And I learned from that 5-inch TV set. So when I went to kindergarten, I was at a disadvantage. Even when you start off at a disadvantage like that, even when I took the SATs
Yeah.
in high school, my math score was right in the high 700s, but my English score was, I barely got 500, like
So
390,
even in high school. Wow.
in high school,
Yeah.
because the catch up was difficult when you only speak Greek at home.
Wow. And your grade school is the Greek American Institute, correct?
Well, I went to PS 192. I went to grammar
Okay.
school.
Yeah.
I went to public high school, a public grammar school. And then about the 5th grade, my parents thought that you need a little bit of religion. Says, what do I know? I just did what my parents told me to do. So we went to a parochial school from the 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade. And at that point, after that, I went to Brooklyn Tech High School,
Well, one thing I really was
another
impressed,
public school.
another public school, but you did mention something about the Greek American school, which I thought was really fascinating. You said that to this day, there's like 30 or so people in that school. You keep in
No, there
touch
was
with
30 people in the class.
in your class, excuse me.
Uh,
Yeah.
And I would say I'm in touch with about 22, 23 of them.
That's remarkable. Why is
Because we
that?
grew
That's
up
incredible.
together.
Yeah.
We grew up together, and
What's that bond about? Yeah.
there's a bond there. And I got the same bond. I got 2 bonds. I got bonds with my grammar school friends, and I got bonds with my high school friends.
Brooklyn Tech.
But NYU was so large, had like 20,000, 30,000, 40,000 students. I forget at that time. We have a few bonds, but not as many as high school and grammar school.
Why do you think over the years that bond has never gone away and that you've kept in touch for so long? You just seem like you're a very relationship driven person. Do you think that has a lot to do with it, or what's the?
I believe in relationships. I remember I used to look up to other people being successful, and I wanted to be successful. Back in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, Aristotle Onassis was so famous.
Yeah.
And I would like, I wish I could be Aristotle Onassis. And, uh, and that was my goal. Well, the Greek newspapers are treating me like I am the Aristotle Onassis that they don't have now.
You just need that yacht.
Yeah.
Hey, hope you're enjoying the most recent episode of Payne Points of Wealth. Everything you hear on this podcast, along with some due diligence of your own, can help you get ahead financially, literally at any stage of your journey. But if you want a more hands-on approach and you saved over $1 million, Bob, Chris, and I will put together for you our total financial master plan, and we'll do that with no obligation or cost. It's a full holistic review. We literally look at everything. We go as far as building you your own personalized financial portal. We'll give you a bird's eye view of your entire financial life, and we'll hone in on every financial issue you need to address today. Whether it's an income plan for retirement, how do you take Social Security? How do you draw from your portfolio? How do you factor in inflation? We'll build a dynamic income plan for you. We'll look at diversification. Has your portfolio been up and down with the markets, extremely volatile, or have you been sitting in cash? Paralysis by analysis. You can't figure out what to do. We'll put together a full investment game plan tied to your goals, show you how to grow your wealth, but most importantly, protect it over the rest of your life. And we'll look at fees and taxes. Wall Street loves to sell you high cost, tax inefficient products, whether it's an annuity, mutual fund, brokerage product. We'll do a deep dive of every investment you own. We'll show you how to reduce the cost, optimize your portfolio for taxes. It's not what you make, it's what you take. You'll get our full tax playbook. If you want this full holistic review and you saved over $1 million, simply go to www.paynecm.com/financial plan or click the link below to see if you qualify for a free financial review. Why do you think you looked up to him? What was it about him that was so success? So define success. Like in your mind, what does that mean?
I remember on that 5-inch television set, I used to watch the show Burke's Law about this detective that had a Rolls Royce. I said, I wish I could get a Rolls Royce someday. So I was working when I owned an airline and had offices in
Helmsing building
in London.
Okay, yeah.
Capital Airlines, and I was offered by a diplomat because he came to London, and the car had a left-hand drive. In London, it's all right-hand drive.
Yes.
He offered me the Rolls Royce for £12,000, which was about $12,000 at that point. I don't know.
Yeah.
I bought it because I always wanted the Rolls Royce that Burke's Law had. But in the last 40 years since I've owned it, I still own it.
You still own it?
Yes. I've driven it maybe 1,000 miles in 40 years. And I must have spent, would I pay for the car? $12,000? I must have spent $200,000 in maintenance.
So just symbolic of this is something you dreamed as a kid. Yeah.
You respect your elders. You respect your forefathers. It was about 10 years ago, 8 years ago, the country of Greece put my picture on a postage stamp, not a make-believe postage stamp.
What did that feel like?
A real postage stamp. I wasn't going to do it.
Why?
But I did it because I wanted my grandfathers and great-grandfathers to look down and be proud of the Catsimatidis name. And that's why I did it. And
Love that.
it was the most most successful postage stamp in the history of the post office doing those things. And people were sending me letters and cards, and it was my postage stamp on the letter. And it was a great experience, and it made my forefathers happy, and I was happy.
I like that. It's not just about your ego, but it's more about the fact that you're part of this lineage and you've gotten to where you've gotten to because of all these people that
I
will
didn't
before you.
care about myself. I cared about my forefathers looking down and being happy.
Where does that come from? Do you think that comes from growing up on a small island in Greece or being from a small island in Greece?
No, you got to think about where that comes from. But it was a great honor, and then I got very involved with the Greek Orthodox Church, and I worked for the Archbishop. Right now, I'm the highest layperson in the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese, and I also report to the Patriarch, who sits on equal ground with the Pope. And one of my best experiences, we flew to Jerusalem on the 500th year anniversary of Christianity with Constantinople, where the Patriarch is headquartered, and Rome, where the Pope is headquartered. And they sit on equal ground in Christianity, and we had a joint ceremony at the church, the Holy Sepulchre's Church.
Okay.
And I'm in there. There's only 50 civilians in that church, and there's the Pope and the Patriarch and the head rabbi of Israel and the Patriarch of Jerusalem. Were all sitting there together and having a joint ceremony. So I've experienced a lot of good things. I believe, when I tell my son and my daughter is when I didn't know what to do other than work,
Yeah.
I said, I'm going to do it all. I'm going to do charities. I'm involved in so many charities. I'm going to do charities. I'm going to be, I'll do religion. I'm going to do whatever. I didn't want to have regrets that I missed something. So I did it all.
So is that kind of the way you justified it when you were working your tail off in college, running these stores? You weren't going skiing with your buddies, but you said, you know what? I'm going to be wildly successful and I'm going to get everything
Yeah.
down the
And
line. Is that kind of like,
I also wanted to go to the Air Force Academy. I wanted to fly. So what happened? When I was 29, 30 years old, I went to take flying lessons. The company that became NetJets, I started the original company. I bought my first jet from Roy Disney I was about 29, 30 years old, and we started servicing Atlantic City. Now, here's a good business plan. You know, I'm learning to fly, and I tell my pilot, this is expensive. We got to make a business out of it. And we made a business out of it. We made a deal with the, at that time, which hotels were in Atlantic City? Resorts was there.
yeah.
And I said to them, you're bringing in people from a 150-mile radius by limousine.
Yes.
How about you use my jet and you bring them in from a 500-mile radius? I charge you $5,000. These suckers, I mean, customers would lose $20,000, have dinner, and they go down to by corporate jet to Atlantic City, have
Perfect.
dinner, and you know, and guess what? We built that business up from one jet up to 48 jets.
Wow.
And that's when we sold it to Santulli, and Santulli, at that point, we created NetJets. And then they sold my pilot, Jim Jacobs, my friend and pilot.
Yeah.
We were partners. He stayed with Santulli, and when they sold it to Warren Buffett, it was for $700-800 million.
Wow.
So I started an airline. No, we took over an airline too, Capital Airlines. We had NetJets. I used to love to fly. I had 4,000 jet hours when I stopped
Yeah.
flying.
Well, so let's sit back here for a second.
We're in
So
the real estate
you're
business.
29 years old, right?
Yes.
You've already had wild success at this point in the grocery business. You have this airline business did really, really well. And all of a sudden you own Capital Air, which is this huge business. And I have to say, this is one of the most 80s moments I've ever heard because you had an office in the Helmsley building.
Yes. And
You
I
could
used to go, I loved it. I used to go.
Were the bathrooms in gold or something? I feel like this is the most 80s, like,
No, in the Helmsley building, but next door was the Pan Am building.
you had a helipad on the roof,
I
right?
used to go up to the helipad, take the helicopter to my office at JFK Airport. And that was an experience. You know, I loved it. And I learned how to fly the DC-8s and the DC-9s. And it was an experience.
How did
of
you
a
feel in your life
lifetime.
at that time? Like,
And
did you, yeah.
we had headquarters in London, Frankfurt, Brussels, and we had the exclusive landing rights. I negotiated it for Tel Aviv, you know, and the Jews loved me. I mean, and the Israelis loved me. Hey, one experience, I got to tell you this story.
Yeah.
One experience was, you know, airlines were running low on money because People's Express was a fraud.
Right. They're undercutting the whole
They
industry.
undercut everybody and put us in a little bit of trouble. And one time we didn't get we didn't pay the catering bill, and they didn't send us the catering at JFK for the Tel Aviv flight. So I send my manager, I said, go to McDonald's, buy how many passengers? He says 240. Buy 300 cheeseburgers or hamburgers, and offer it to the people going to Israel. And whoever wants it takes it, and whoever doesn't want to take, we'll give them a credit for the flight. Not one cancellation. They all got on the flight. They all took the cheeseburgers and hamburgers, and the flight went to Tel Aviv.
Amazing.
And we also flew to Caribbean, Puerto Rico, San Juan and Borinquen, Dominican Republic, Jamaica. We went into the airplane leasing business. Air Jamaica had 9 airplanes or 8 airplanes. 8 of the 9 airplanes were leased to them by us. So we were king of the Caribbean.
Did you feel like the king at that time? I mean, you're a young guy, you're wildly
Well,
successful. What was it like to be in your
we
shoes?
saw the handwriting on the wall that People's Express was going to put us out of business
Right.
because they would fly from New York to San Francisco. We were at 199 round trip, which was the cheapest flight you could ever get. They were $99.
Yeah, but they're losing money. They're
Yeah,
just,
you
yeah.
can't. But there was a giant fraud. They would because every time they ran out of money, they go to Wall Street and raise more money based on their sales. They never took reserves on the maintenance or anything like that. So their financial statements were completely fraud.
Wow.
I mean, almost as fraudulent as Crazy Eddie in those days. We sold the airline, but the people we sold it to only wanted to fly it to Puerto Rico. It was Senator Nick Nagaris, the Senate Majority Leader of Puerto Rico, and he was financed by Drexel Burnham of Puerto Rico. So
No
we sold
problems.
the airline,
Yeah.
and he started flying to Puerto Rico. And after a few weeks or months, machine kaput,
Oh no.
blows up. So we kept the airplanes as collateral.
Okay.
So we went to bankruptcy court to get back the airplanes.
Yeah.
And on the way to bankruptcy court to get back the airplanes, the same trustee that had the airplanes, guess what? Had United Refining, the oil company. And I ended up buying the oil company. And then we take the airplanes back from
Yeah.
Capital, and we start an airline
In
in
Canada. Yeah.
where called Nationair Airlines. And me and my partner, we couldn't own more than 25% or something. So we leased them the airplanes and started Nationair out of Florida, out of Montreal.
Oh wow. Okay.
And then because I was so depressed when I wasn't in the airline business anymore, and I wasn't
You couldn't take the Concorde to London for 3 hours,
Yeah.
right? I'm sorry, John. It's been tough for you.
That Concorde was phenomenal. Half the airport, half the JFK airport was ours with British Airways. So we had reciprocatory agreements that they flew the Concorde.
Yeah.
We get to fly the Concorde
But
for
John,
nothing,
John,
being the executives of the airline.
but how did it feel like you came from West Harlem and all of a sudden now you're in your late 20s, early 30s, you're flying the Concorde. Do you ever look in the mirror and just say, this is crazy, I can't believe I got here? Like, how did that feel?
It felt good. And then on top of that, I was so bored. We bought we had the airline business, we had that, and we bought the other bankruptcy situation
Because
was
you were bored.
we bought Pantry Pride from Ron Perlman.
Yes, that's
We gave him the money to buy Revlon.
because he took the loss and put it.
Yeah, he took the loss carry forward and bought Revlon. We bought Pantry Pride in Florida with supermarkets from Key West all the way up to Riviera Beach. And that was another great deal. I think we paid very little for it. Chemical Bank financed us.
Why were
at
you able
that
to take
time.
such bold moves though? Like, most people,
Because I was so bored and had nothing to do from Smyrna, Tennessee, when I was running the airline. I had to come back to New York.
but it's boredom and it's balls. Like, but what's different about you that you were able to do these things that most people aren't able to do? Like, what is that difference?
Oh, I don't know. I wasn't. It was just me and my wife at that time. At that time, my first wife, and I said I really wanted to create. I wanted to compete. I remember the Forbes list that came out in 1986, 87. I don't know. I was on the near miss list.
So that hurt.
Yeah, and I was on the near miss list along with along with Perlman and Icon. So I said, "Wow, I am pissing with the large dogs," and I just kept going. But I was smart enough to say, "All right, I bought the oil company, I bought Gristedes, I bought Pantry Pride. All of a sudden, we're doing $2 billion a year in business, 2 or 3 billion. which is a lot of money
Those
at that
days.
time.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And I said, I better slow up and make sure this is running right. And that's what I did. And I make sure we have the right accounting, make sure we have the right uh, uh, checks and balances. And that's why I succeeded.
Is it about getting the right people? Because I mean, that's a lot of businesses to
I
get
always tried
streamlined.
to hire people that were smarter than me. We had the Bahamas operation was part of Pantry Pride, so we operated in the Bahamas. Then from Grand Union, we bought uh, the stores in the Virgin Islands. So we had a Virgin Islands operation that was doing very well, and we bought from Grand Union all the West Coast stores that Grand Union had, the West Coast of Florida.
Wow.
So we had about 200 stores at that time.
Like, how do you keep track of all that? Like, I don't even understand if you've just all these businesses in 1 year.
By
Like,
the way,
how?
I became a computer guy when I was operating like 3, 4 stores in New York in
Yes.
1970, 71. We were the first ones to have computers for our supermarkets, and I programmed them all.
So you're always kind of looking at technology and ways you can use
Yes,
efficiencies with technology.
and with the programming them all was I found a problem with me. I said, I'm busy being the program director. I'm not running the stores enough. So that's when I hired this guy, Larry, to run the computers. And I went back to running our company. Uh, Dick Henry was the guy that taught me how to program computers. And the other thing I always became better than my teachers.
Okay.
So I became a great computer programmer. But I've noticed something because of all the technical things about programming because in those days you have to figure out where the error is going to happen in programming.
Yeah.
I think the programming enhanced my mind. I thought that I got smarter,
Like, more dimensional the way you can see
more
things.
dimensional, more
Yeah.
smarter, because the programming made increased my mind, my neurons going into.
Yeah.
Uh, so we were
So cool.
so with the supermarket business, we bought all the real estate, and we kept the supermarket business separate from the real estate. We kept the aviation business separate, and we kept the oil business separate. So I kept it all separate. I kept real estate separate. I kept operations separate, and I built up the management team in all of them.
So it's all siloed. So they're like these, you would kind of almost put a different hat on when you would go to each
Yes,
entity and figure things
yes.
out. That makes sense. Yeah.
And the greatest deal, I guess, we did when we bought the oil company. It was a New York Stock Exchange company that some people bought, some did an early leverage buyout out of Houston, and they bankrupted the company. And when I bought the company, I didn't know a lot about this. When the creditors committee says to me, Chase was the large creditor. It was Chase, Marine Midland Bank, and 3 insurance companies. They said to me, "Well, what do you know about running an oil company?" And I'm in the creditors committee. I said, uh, "Olive oil, Western oil, crude oil, isn't it the same?" Well, I pissed off the creditors committee, but we come back. I start adding some management to the company, and I
Okay.
come back 30 days later, 60 days later, and we owe the creditors committee 100 million plus post petition interest.
Okay.
So I come back to the creditors committee meeting, and they ask you for a financial statement. I'm operating the company now 60 days. The first meeting, what the hell are you doing here? You're a grocery guy. Get the hell out of here.
Right.
They said Bob Sachs was the Chase Manhattan guy. My God, 40 years later, I remember the names.
It's amazing.
And I said, Mr. Catsimatidis, you have your financial statement ready? Yes, sir. I said, what did you do for the last month? Because we had to be a month by month financial statement because you had to report to the creditors committee. I said, last month, we made $7.5 million. They all fell off the chairs. I applied some management skills. I did what I had
Can
to
you give an
do,
example of what you did? Because that's remarkable.
and we made $7.5 million,
How'd you do it?
and we only owe 100. So at that point, it wasn't no longer as John, welcome here, John. Glad you're here. And we shook hands, and I paid him 100 cents on the dollar on the 100 million. Plus, we had the money. We paid him post petition interest in cash, 25 million, 29 million. So I paid him post petition interest plus 100 cents a dollar. And guess what? I got 100% of the company.
Wow.
So now here's the deal. We go down in bankruptcy court. It gets confirmed. It's going to get confirmed. 100 cents on a dollar, 25 million in cash that we had in our account, the oil company,
Yeah.
for post petition interest. On the way down, we're on the airplane. I said, guys, the 100 million. It's like April. If I'm going to pay you back before December 31,
Give me a discount.
can I get my post petition interest back?
Yeah.
Yes. Everybody said yes. All of a sudden, I'm off to the races. The first guy you go to, because they were handing out money like it was for free,
Okay.
Drexel Burnham. But they want to attach your left testicle to your right ear. And then they come to me and say, well, John, we're going to give you $40 million extra. I said, well, I don't need it. No, we're going to give you $40 million extra, and we want you to invest in our other deals. I said,
That sounds
how do you
complicated.
like this? Because I'm an honest guy. Honesty and integrity.
Yeah.
You know? And I said, and then one of my banks, I was the token Greek at JP Morgan.
The token Greek. I like that. Yeah.
The original JP Morgan, the real JP Morgan.
Yeah.
And they liked me because they needed a token Greek, I guess. And they come back to me. And I remember. I'm trying to remember the vice chairman. The vice chairman comes to me and says, John, we know this company because it was a New York Stock Exchange company.
Okay.
JP Morgan financed this company for all the years it was public, for like 1940s, 1950s,
Long time.
1960s, 1970s. It was a JP Morgan company. Says, we want to refinance you. I said, okay. So who am I going to pick? Drexel Burnham or JP Morgan?
JP Morgan.
I have to buy white socks and white shoes, you ready for this? A company coming out of bankruptcy.
Okay.
In December, the deal's due December 31. In December, JP Morgan gets 3 insurance companies, puts up $110 million. You sitting down?
Yeah.
Unsecured.
What?
Unsecured.
How?
We closed the deal. And Chase Manhattan, which was different in those days,
Right.
they had to give me back $25 million.
Wow.
And $25 million to Chase was a lot of money in those days. They were really pissed off. And I think I was on their shit list for a while. But I did everything I promised to do. I don't know why I was on the shit list. I did whatever I was supposed to do. So I got $110 million unsecured and kept the company going and became, I saved 5,000 jobs and became
Incredible.
a great company in America. And JP Morgan, Marine Midland, and the other insurance companies got their money, 100 cents on a dollar. And God bless America. So that was one of my good deals.
It's a pretty good deal.
Then I ran for mayor in 2013.
So what was the impetus to run for mayor? I mean, obviously you're running all these businesses.
I wanted something to do that's different. I wanted success someplace
You get
else.
bored quick.
I'm getting older. I get bored less. But it was an experience running for mayor. We didn't have fundraisers. We had friend raises.
Okay.
We spent my own money. 2013, I spent $12.5 million of my own money, which was a lot of money in those days. Not as much as Bloomberg. I was lucky. I lost.
You think it would have been a nightmare to actually have to run the city?
I could have run it. And don't forget, I wanted to do the 2015, 2016 World's Fair. It would have happened. I would have created it.
That would be cool.
But I went on to start our construction company and starting building all these big buildings in our construction company. And I enjoyed that too. Because you know what the buildings we're building?
Okay.
You know what I tell my architects? I want to build something that's a wow building. Says, what's a wow building? People will look at it, look up at it, and say, wow, I want to live there.
Yeah.
And my hero was Elliot Spitzer's dad. He used to come to all my fundraisers for Bill Clinton, because Bill Clinton was one of my favorite presidents in those days. And still is a good friend. I had dinner with him a couple of weeks ago.
Cool.
And he created 200 Central Park South on 59th Street, that round corner building.
Yeah, sure.
When I was going to college, and I lived on 135th Street, and I had to tell those Jewish girls at NYU where did I live. I didn't dare tell them I lived on 135th Street. I live on 200 Central Park South. And this one gal comes to me one day and says, John, I went there and to find you, and the doorman doesn't know you. I said,
You got
caught. The apartment is in a corporate name. That was my favorite building, and I learned that you build a building like that, people love
the showmanship.
Then I wanted to be in the media business because after I ran for mayor in 2013, Jerry Crowley took me to 970 AM, and I had a radio show. And WABC was offered to me a few years later. I just wrote the check. I grew up with WABC. And we took it from number 28 in the marketplace to number one, Nielsen-wise, number one in the country.
I think it's those financial guys on Saturday that drive the whole.
They're good. But Larry Kudlow. Bo Schneider's excellent on Saturday mornings. You're on Saturday afternoon.
Thank you, John.
And we went from number 28 in the tri-state area to number 1 or 2, and we're number 1 AM station in the country. So I believe in success. Then I bought the baseball team. The Yankees called me up and it says, we have a minor league team in Staten Island. We want you to get involved with it. The Yankees call you up. You don't say no to the Yankees. So the Yankees own 15%. I own 42%. And the partner from New Jersey owns 42%. And we're enjoying owning it.
Yeah.
And we're trying to make that a success now.
Well, one thing you said in your book, I think is kind of interesting, is you never want to be alone. And I'm wondering what that comes from. It seems like you are such a social.
I was an only child. I would not go to sleep unless my mom came and put her arm around me. And I would hold on to my mother's arm going to sleep.
Where do you think that comes from?
Being afraid of being alone. Being afraid of living in the dark. To this day, I have a little light on at night.
Is that right?
Yes.
That's interesting.
And I remember when my daughter was born or my son was born, they would sleep in between me and Margot, and I would put my arm around them. So it's having heart. Having heart is very important.
Well, your relationship spans so far and wide, and it fascinates me. Like just how accessible you are, and I can text you at any time. You respond. I mean, there's just something about your general demeanor.
I love people.
Yeah,
I love people, and I love to interact with them, whether it's 3 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Final question.
Yes.
Every guest this.
Yeah.
But if you could go back to your youth, and there's one song or album you heard that changed your whole perspective of the world, what is it and why?
Oh my God. I used to love some of the rodeo songs. I used to love some of the Sinatra songs. Fly Me to the Moon. I used to,
Song.
I remember I loved airplanes. So I love great songs. To this day, on my 5 o'clock show, we try to interact with a song. I remember when we were running during the election and President Biden would do something stupid. You know how we would open the song? We play that song on the eve of destruction.
Classic song.
Yes.
Thanks for listening to the Payne Points of Wealth. Hopefully you found the ideas discussed in this episode valuable and useful for your own financial journey. You can find out more about Bob, Ryan, and Chris's firm, Payne Capital Management at bebullish.com or through the contact information found in the description of this episode in your podcast player or app. Join us next week for another episode of The Payne Points of Wealth, brought to you by Payne Capital Management. Information provided on today's show is provided for informational purposes only and does not constitute investment, tax, or legal advice. Investment is obtained from sources that are deemed to be reliable, but their accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed.